Welcome to Winners, Wallets, and Worldviews, the only show that's going to teach you
how to be somebody.
Thank you again. Appreciate your time. I give a talk about the story of Cypress Semiconductor called 0 to a Billion.
You're not going to make it. It's not like being a star quarterback.
You guys are all leaders. You guys are trying to crush it.
Ladies and gentlemen, whatever's going on in your life, you're going to run into that block.
Recognize that you're leaving 95% of American business completely behind.
You guys are here learning, getting education.
You're going to run into someone standing there.
No. Michael Jordan's humility is what we're talking about.
Saying to you, you're not good enough to get through to the other side. And I say to you, let's roll, baby. Let's roll.
So welcome our speakers, and thanks everybody.
Well, thank you for having us here. This is good. Well, thank you for the introduction. Appreciate that, Megan. Thank you for the invite. Well, today, Megan reached out, a couple weeks ago saying you guys were learning a lot about kind of transitioning organizations and learning about how you can start to build a culture that's a winning culture, really enthusiastic about engaging with people. So I call up one of my good friends, Dale Feinauer, right here. Dale is the MBA professor. He's the host of It's Time podcast, and Dale and I got to know each other because we started producing his podcast the last year. Introduced ourselves, and it was really a fantastic experience getting to know Dale. So I was like, this is Dale's sweet spot. He really works well with conflict management, with crucial conversations, and with building teams. So I thought I could be like maybe the Al Michaels, and then Dale could be like the John Madden, and be the commentary and the colorful nature of the show today. So without that, I'll roll into our long bios. I always call it my I Love Me page. This is where we have all the lengthy narrative about, if you guys can even read this is all the long professional credentials. This is about how awesome I am and how awesome Dale is. And Dale's is shorter because he's accomplished much more in a shorter period of time. I had to do this to feel good about myself and make a much longer list. But my background is in a lot of entrepreneurship. I work for Oshkosh Defense, which I'm going to tell some stories about today. And I also have done a lot in community involvement with the Oshkosh area, consulting with various companies, as Megan mentioned, a lot of startups, early investment stage. And one of the big challenges they go through as an early startup is how do you start to go from being a very practical, hands-on creator of a product and grow that into becoming a leader and a manager of a team. And it's very difficult sometimes for these companies to go through that. So that's one of the areas that we spent a lot of time over the last decade, me and my team. And Dale, if you want to do your elevator pitch about how you rock the world and how you run everything out there.
Been at Oshkosh for 38 years, teaching there in the College of Business. Started with human resource management. Very quickly understood that was the most important part of an organization. Always got to suck up to your guests.
HR always wins.
There you go. But teach a wide variety of stuff within the College of Business. I'm sort of a short attention span squirrel. As soon as there's a new course, I teach it because it's fascinating and interesting. Leadership is certainly a focus of mine. I spend a lot of time in family businesses helping with succession, strategic planning, leadership. The thing I would say that I find endlessly fascinating is that in the leadership arena, there isn't any right answer. So if you're looking for us to come in today and tell you how you're supposed to lead, here are the 3 things you do, you always do them and it always works. No, we don't know that answer. The problem with leadership is you're always leading people. And if you look around the room, people are weird. People are odd, right? There is no right answer. There is no do this and it always works because humans aren't all the same. How many of you have more than one child? Does the same thing work for one child as for another child? So leadership is endlessly fascinating because you constantly got to be thinking about what works in a particular environment for any particular group of people, and even for one person over time, what works changes as they move through their career and their needs and their interests. So that's my focus, is largely now on the leadership side along with some of the human resource management stuff.
So Dale and I have had some very fun play with each other as far as the different styles that he's brought from an academic side. I'd say my military upbringing is a little bit hard-nosed and a lot different than Dale. So we have playful debate, I would say, in a lot of the styles. So today we want to create some discussion around some of the existing tensions you might feel within maybe a people-focused culture versus maybe a profit-focused culture, and kind of explore what those tensions might be, what some resistance you might feel, or other questions you might have. So I want to make sure that if you guys are online, we see everything. So if you want to send a hand, if you have any questions, or send a chat, we want to make this as interesting and answer the questions you might have, and maybe our perspectives can enlighten some different thoughts. So that's kind of a little bit about us, I guess. The big thing that when I started, so I was in the military, and it was always about results, was kind of how you assessed the quality of a team, was what do the actual results look like. And in about 2012, 2013, there was a model in leadership that became quite popular, and it was called the servant leadership models. Anybody heard of servant leadership? So what have you guys heard about servant leadership, or what's kind of the main takeaway? I saw a couple hands over here. What's your name, sir?
My name is Mike.
Mike, what's servant leadership to you?
Well, servant leadership to me is leading by example and holding people accountable.
Okay.
Expectations, making sure they understand what your expectations are.
Oh, Dale's got a lot to say about expectations, don't you, Dale? And holding people accountable.
But it's a great, you've got the combination. It's leading by example and it's holding people accountable. There's two sides of this, and you've got to do both. You can't let one dominate or you get in trouble.
Back here, we had a couple hands. What did you guys know about or think about servant leadership?
Basically the same thing.
So there's that person, that leading by example, that's kind of the nature of it. Yeah, so this became a lot more popular in about 2012, 13, and one of the ways I kind of got introduced to it is when I got out of the military in 2015. 2016, Oshkosh Corporation hired a new CEO, and this is Wilson Jones up in the corner. He looks like a CEO, doesn't he? Kind of just have like the jawline, you know. And this is the stock price in 2016, right after he was hired. It was $34.23. Now, Wilson Jones introduced a concept to the organization. He says, put aside all of our different goals, we're going to say Oshkosh is a people-first organization. Makes sense, right? If people can come together and build a company's made up of people, that can win. But does that really get the results? Well, he introduced a book to his executive staff called Everybody Matters. I got a couple copies of this book, and if you guys have questions, I can send you a link to it as well. And it's by Bob Chapman. And Bob Chapman was the CEO of Barry Waymiller, and they did a consulting gig with a company out of Green Bay, actually probably 2 decades ago. And his big takeaway from Everybody Matters is that through people, you can actually achieve some of these different results. This isn't just to have an organization to make people feel fun and exciting, but it's actually about using the engagements, the relationships, and the culture that you can build to actually achieve winning records. So when Wilson Jones stepped down as CEO in 2021, he had implemented this framework, and the stock price was $133. So you're seeing at least 4 times growth in the stock from implementing this style of culture. So we're going to talk a lot about this today, and kind of some of the spark notes of what we've learned in this book, as well as kind of more mainstream practices that people are using in emerging leadership philosophy. I think to start, we wanted to share a little bit about this tension that I mentioned, which is we've got results, and we also have, where are we at? Yeah, we'll stop here. So we've got this idea of results, and we also have the idea of building a culture. So the first thing that I thought of was, do you want to have a group of people? Do we go to work just to feel good? Do we go to work just to care for each other, whatever? I think at the end of the day, you want to make sure there's something to show for it. So this is the tension that we see exists. One is everybody's happy, and the other is we got to get stuff done. What do you think of this, Dale? Does this tension exist? Do you notice it? Do you feel it too?
I absolutely think that there is a perceived tension between, is this a good place to work? Is HR's job to make this a fun place? Everybody's having a good time? Or is our objective to get something done? Let's focus, let's sell, let's make things happen. What do you think about those two? Is the purpose of the organization to make a profit? Is the purpose of the organization to have a good place for people to work?
Yes.
Go on. How is it both? How do those two fit?
It has to be. It has to be both. Otherwise, if people aren't enjoying coming to work, you're not going to turn profits because people aren't giving it their efforts that they could be, or they're not getting the training that they need because they're not engaged.
Okay.
So effort and training is a requirement, right? If you're disengaged, there's probably not going to be the right training, so people can't know how to do their job, and they might not have the intensity at their work or the effort that they're putting forward, right?
So,
Correct.
Okay.
So people have to be engaged and not going to be engaged if it's an unhappy place to be.
Yeah, I saw some hands back here too.
Yeah, comment.
Well, I was just saying both as well, because I mean, you want to come to work happy, and yeah, you want to get stuff done, but you also want to make it a likable place to work, where you go to work and you know, man, what I do matters. It's not only about, I mean, yeah, a company wants to make billions of dollars and they want to grow and stuff, but you also want to make sure your employees feel happy about coming to work. So I agree, maybe both of them.
I don't think you can pull the two apart. I think you're absolutely right. It is a debate that managers, I am old enough to remember when this was a big debate in organizations. The purpose of the organization is to make a profit, and the employees just got to shut up and do as they're told.
Can you nap at work? No?
No?
Google has nap pods. I don't know.
Well, I don't nap because I don't believe that's the correct terminology. I engage in biphasic sleep at the office. So I do sleep at work. I mean, there's times when, you know, I typically am at the office 6:30, 7 o'clock, and 1 o'clock I'm feeling tired, and I'll cover the window in my little office and I'll lay down and sleep on the floor for 15, 20 minutes.
Well, we do give a 15-minute break, so whatever you do on those 15 minutes, completely understandable. As long as you're back on the
Is it to the organization's benefit for me to take a nap?
Yes.
Why?
You're refreshed.
What?
Refreshed and your mind can focus again.
I am convinced I'm more productive for the rest of the day if I take that 15, 20-minute nap. Absolutely agree.
Now, if you have to push X amount of widgets out, do you still get a nap?
Well, some days I don't get a nap because I don't have widgets, but I have students, and as a result of things, sometimes you just, you know, and I don't nap every day. But I'm old enough to remember when there was this perception that employees were much more shut up and do as you're told. What's wrong with the employees should just shut up and do what they're told analysis? Why is that wrong? Because that was the way we ran organizations for a long time.
Is anybody okay with that? Just shut up and do what you're told? Is anybody?
All the really bright people at the top of the organization, CEO's the brightest guy in the room, so he runs the place, tells everybody else what to do, they tell people what to do, and everybody does as they're told. We're good. What's wrong with that model?
Maybe someone in Rochester or Mankato has some feedback.
Yes.
We'll be looking this way, but we promise we're seeing you guys.
Comments?
Anything they'd like to add?
Say that again?
They're not jumping at it right now. What about here? Yeah.
I think it's more about what you say, how you say it, and not what you say. So instead of being like, shut up and doing what you're told, if you're expressing that in a nicer way, maybe they will just shut up and keep it moving, you know? But,
That's actually, so you said how you say it versus what you say.
correct.
That's
All right,
actually,
but-
yeah.
But why is it fundamentally a mistake now to expect your employees to simply come in and do what they are told to do?
They're your experts. They know how to do their job. You want them to provide feedback.
Who knows more about the details of a specific job than the person doing the job? Right? You can either have people engaged, I love the engagement term, and you've got their brains involved, they're doing their thing, or you can have them asleep at a switch, just kind of doing what they need to do to not get fired. Fundamentally, and AJ knows I'm really big on this distinction, you can think of the relationship you have with the organization, the relationship you have with your employees, in one of two different ways. You can think of it in terms of tasks, and that's historically how we've thought of the employee-employee relationship. So, Megan has hired us to come in and to talk. So what's the task? What am I supposed to do between now and 3 o'clock? Talk. Okay. Okay, I'm supposed to talk from now to 3.
But you get a nap.
But I might get a nap. I like that nap concept. AJ's going to carry the water for a bit while I'm napping. what's the outcome? If the task is to talk, what's the purpose of our being here?
Us to benefit, get a different view of something that we might do on a daily basis and not really notice, just a different perception.
Okay, so the outcome is for you folks to learn something that's useful to you in helping run the organization. Is it possible that I could complete the task and talk for 2 hours without you learning anything useful?
Yes.
You could have been a little slower on that one. You didn't have to jump immediately to the yes, but okay. Which is a better way to manage your employees? By task or by outcome?
By task.
By task?
So Dale could stand here and he could talk about Russian history today.
I could.
Would that accomplish the outcome? Probably not, but Dale would be talking. You know a lot about Russian history, don't you, Dale?
I do know something about Russian history. I'm trying to figure out how the Cultural Revolution in China or the Russian Revolution. I could try and use Lenin as an example of leadership that didn't work real well.
There was some guy that was assassinated, thrown into a river, and he got washed downstream, and then he stayed alive in frozen water for like weeks
Rasputin.
or something. Rasputin, that's it.
Yeah.
See, you know a lot about Russia.
Yeah. Well, and he was but anyway, yes. What's the advantage of taking an outcome focus as opposed to task? If I'm giving you a task, how does that feel? If I tell you, look, would you sit up straight? You're supposed to sit up straight. You're looking like you're not paying any damn attention.
If you're not staying up.
So here's, if I tell you what I need you to do, how do you respond to being told what to do?
You a lot of times shut down. I mean,
Right?
In one ear out the other.
Right. Somebody tells me what to do. I'm a fairly childish person. You tell me what I have to do. My immediate response is, well, I'm not doing that. I don't know what I'm going to do, but that's off the plate now. That is no longer an option.
Well, so something interesting about the idea of a task is when we were in the military and you would plan an op order. Was anybody in the service at all? In the military, when you're planning a mission, you have to write a 5-paragraph op order, which is really like 50 pages. It's not 5 paragraphs. And if you don't want to read the whole 50 pages, there's a spot in there. It's called task and purpose. Every task has a purpose, because exactly what Dale's talking about. If you don't know what the outcome is or the intention behind it, number one, you don't know what to do if the task gets put in the way. If I have to go clear a building and the building gets blown up and I don't know what to do now, how do I know what the final outcome is supposed to look like? So if you just assign tasks and then other obstacles come up, it's going to be like one of the soldiers I had one time. I said, hey, I need you to deliver this envelope to this guy's desk. And that's all he could handle.
Straightforward task.
Yeah, could just take the envelope to his desk. And about a couple hours later, I came back, I'm like, hey, did you ever take that envelope to his desk? He's like, oh, no, he wasn't there. And I was like, so where's the envelope? Oh, it's on my desk. I'm like, you didn't think to like slide it under the table or like put it in his mailbox or hand it to somebody else that was next door? Or he's just like, no, you told me to give him the envelope and he wasn't there. So, okay, if I would have said, take the envelope, give it to his desk because he really needs to see it today. Okay, the purpose is he needs to see it today, so therefore he could come up with other ideas. Okay, he's not here. I can put it in the mailbox, slide it under the desk, email him, I don't know, and figure out a way to get a hold of him. But the idea is task should always come with a purpose, or sometimes you could give purpose and no task because you just have to have, hey, this is...
You're turning the person loose to figure it out.
Yeah, which can be dangerous as well.
Depending on how much experience and knowledge the person has. Let's go back to this reaction, outcome. If I come to you and ask you to help me achieve an outcome, I want you to help me. I've got all this Pepsi product and I need to get it from here to here. Can you help me make that happen? That's basically your job, right? So you're going to these, and will you help me move from A to B? What's your reaction? Help is the most powerful word in the English language. Very quick diversion. I'm a big fan of evolutionary psychology. The concept is that we've evolved over time. We have opposable thumbs that are really cool. We have big brains. We have all kinds of stuff. But not only do we evolve physically, we evolve psychologically. If you go up behind a horse and touch him in the hindquarters, what do? Why? Okay, well, why is it, they don't kick if you touch them in the front. If you touch a cow in the hindquarters, they don't kick. Why does a horse kick if you touch them in the hindquarters? What's a horse's claim to fame? What keeps horses alive?
Their heart.
What? Their heart? Well, because their heart lets them do what? Run. If a wolf nails the Achilles tendon of a horse, what happens to the horse? It's wolf meat, right? So now, is that wolf or that horse with the brain about the size of a walnut sitting there thinking, oh, something just touched my hindquarters. It might be something that's there to hurt me. I should kick to defend myself? No. The horse isn't thinking that. Horses just kick. There are certain things that horses do just because horses do them. That's evolutionary psychology. And there's a lot of that occurs. Humans are a fascinating species. We are one of only 6 megasocial species on the planet. There are 6 species on the planet that are megasocial. Megasocial meaning we will do things to help other members of our species for whom we are not genetically related. There's only 6 species that do that. The other 5 are all insects. Those 6 megasocial species represent the majority of the multicellular organisms on the planet. It is really cool to be megasocial. It has great advantages to it. But what that means is that we are a species that responds to the request for help. You're leaving today, and as you're heading out to the parking lot, you stop somewhere. So it's not even here in the parking lot where it's going to be one of your other employees. You stop at the Walmart on the way home and you go to pick something up. And you're leaving the Walmart and there's a person out there in the parking lot with a pair of jumper cables. Says, hey, would you help me jump my car? My car won't start. What's your reaction? How many of you say yes and help them?
No, my wife's from Jersey. They don't do that.
How many of you, we'll talk about your wife in a minute. How many of you think, oh, well, I'm a business person. This is a business opportunity. Yes, I will happily jump your car. $20. Well, why are you laughing?
I wouldn't do that. I would help the person.
Why wouldn't you? I mean, if they have to call a tow truck, that's going to charge them $30. I'm giving them a deal at $20.
It's just kind-heartedness, I guess.
How many of you would either charge them or just say, no, I'm busy. I want to go home and, see the spouse, deal with the kids, do whatever. How many would? Why not? Why is it on you to help them jump their car? They're the ones who didn't get a battery figured out.
Because you would like the same done for you if you're in a tough situation.
And do you really think the world works so well that if you do kind things for other people, people will do kind things for you?
Yes.
The karma is that good.
I'm not going to say all the time, but I do believe in what you give out is sometimes what you get back.
Well, I actually agree with you, but damn it. But if you got in your car and drove away, how would you feel?
A little bit bad.
How many of you think you'd feel bad if you didn't help them? Why?
Because, they needed help. Why not help them if you can?
Your cable.
Yeah. I was thinking you were going, I should get my cables out of my trunk, which, is another thing I could.
So you think you should. It's almost an ethical proposition. How many of you say it's the right thing to do?
Have you heard the parable of Abraham Lincoln and ethical egoism, where Abraham Lincoln he's in his carriage, and horse and buggy, and he's moving along, and he sees an old farm field, and there's no farmer around, but there's a pig stuck in the mud, and he gets out of his presidential quarters in his suit and his tie, and he goes over, and he picks the pig up out of the mud, and he tosses him onto shore, and he goes back into his carriage, and one of his assistants says, "Abe, why did you do that?" And he says, "Well, if I didn't, I would have felt bad all day." And the idea is that sometimes it's in our self-interest to actually act kindly on behalf of each other, which is one of your evolutionary standpoints, the ethical egoism side of it.
And if you manage by task, you are tapping into people's natural resistance to being told what to do. And if you manage people by outcomes, you are effectively asking them for help. I need help getting these products moved. I need help making this HR function happen. I need help getting this distribution done, getting this production done. Outcomes are by definition a request for help, and you are tapping into our natural desire to be helpful. You're either setting up an adversary or a collaborative relationship. Outcomes, though, can be tough. It can be a little difficult to figure out, what's the outcome I'm actually after? And if I ask you to identify the 5 outcomes that you're supposed to achieve in your job, and I ask your boss to achieve the 5 outcomes that they think you're supposed to achieve in your job.
And your boss's boss.
And your boss's boss. Great point. How confident are you that those 3 lists would be the same?
Pretty confident.
Pretty confident. You're a pretty confident guy. You may be wrong, but he's confident. I'm with you, sir. I share that characteristic. Self-confident and wrong from time to time. But I'm happily going through life. Yet outcomes can be more complicated to figure out. The other complication with outcomes is you don't always control them. My objective, our objective, is for you to learn things that are useful on the job. That's not something that AJ and I totally control. That requires you folks to participate. You folks have to be thinking. You have to be paying attention. You have to be engaged. It's a we that's making this happen. It's fairly easy to be evaluated on, can I talk from 1 till 3? Well, that's an easy question. I can talk all day. Whether we can create an environment in which you can learn is a much more complicated thing. So figuring out outcomes can be a little tougher.
So outcomes is just one component to this whole idea of having a culture where you're putting people first. You're putting people in the lead instead of just the actual task itself. And I think what Dale's talking about is the first thing to think about is, am I assigning tasks or am I assigning outcomes? And we talked about that a little bit, but the second part of it is, what's the cost if we don't do it correctly? You said a couple things. What did you say before? What if you have a culture that does not care about people? What happens? They don't want to be engaged. What happens when you're not engaged? Turnover. What else? Things don't get done. Like what? The job. You can't get the job done if people don't want to do it, right? What else? That's it? Just turnover? Just refusal to work? Well, it turns out that people have studied this smarter than myself. And we have, if I can ever get this thing to work, there we go. This is the cost of disengagement. So these folks over at Harvard Business Review came up with a list of these. We have 37% higher absenteeism. People don't want to show up to their jobs. They don't want to work. 49% more accidents on the job. Anybody do any work with safety in their career at all? Huge problems when you have accidents.
Are you
at
the
work,
safety guy?
I am.
Yeah. That probably
49%
really
more
means a lot.
accidents if they're not engaged.
We might need to blow that one
That got
up
your
for you.
attention, huh?
Yeah. 49%. Now you're going to really start to care about people and engage with them, right? No, we just did a whole project on OSHA recordable incidences. So this one's big. I get it. Trust me, I get it. I feel you. 60% more errors or defects. Anybody a perfectionist in here? Is that? I mean, when you interview people, everyone ever say that? You know, like, hey, tell me something that's negative about you. Oh, I'm a bit of a perfectionist, or I work a little too hard. I don't know. You know, it's a little hard sometimes. Yeah, you probably. But yeah, you get 60% more errors when you have a disengaged culture. 18% lower productivity, which obviously corresponds to the bottom line. 16% lower profitability. 37% lower job growth. 65% lower share price over time. I showed you what Wilson did over at Oshkosh Corp. Was able to increase the share price significantly by being more engaged, but that comes with a cost. If people aren't engaged, it costs shareholders money. And then 50% voluntary turnover. So this is the data or the data. Are you guys data? Who's data? Data. Okay. All right. But does anybody say potato though? Or does anybody say tomato? I mean, come on. All right, I got you. Yeah. The cost of disengagement has real results and real effects to a company. So the thing is, if you don't do this, you're going to lose. I had a high school basketball coach said, if you're not getting better, you're getting worse. And that's very true. This is an example of you can decide, oh, we're just going to stay the same, but this is the cost of what could happen. So anyway.
And we know that one of the key drivers of engagement or disengagement is the answer to the question, does anybody in this organization care about me as a person? Do I think anybody in this organization, and ideally it would be somebody in this room, in that room, somebody in management, care about me as a human being? And if the answer is no, you rarely get engaged people. It's an absolutely critical component of engagement.
We were talking in the car about this a little bit too, where, what happened 40, 50 years ago, companies would have incentives like pension plans, or they would have 401ks, or they would have these juicy things to keep you at the company for loyalty. What does loyalty mean? How many of you would say you're loyal to the company? Watch how many people raise their hand. They're all good. Yeah, loyal to the company. Or are you loyal to the people you work with? Which would you say more? More for the people or more for the company? You don't have to do this. I know I know that they're not going to give honest answers when we've got HR in the house.
Well, let me answer. I've worked for the University of Wisconsin Oshkosh for 38 years. I feel zero loyalty to the University of Wisconsin Oshkosh. None. For 38 years, they've given me loyal paychecks. For 38 years, I've given them loyal work, and I think we're even. I don't think I owe them anything, and I don't think they owe me anything. There are a number of individuals currently employed or who have been employed at the University of Wisconsin Oshkosh that I have huge loyalty to. Those are individuals who have been good for my career, who've helped take care of me, who I feel have some concern for Dale as an individual and have been great mentors. And I would go hugely out of my way to take care of them. If Ed Penson called me today and said, Dale, I need you here, I'd say, okay, am I wearing a suit because I'm doing a presentation, or am I wearing jeans because I'm burying a body? What am I doing?
I thought you'd appreciate the contrast a little bit,
But and I bet many of you would have the same relationship. There are people that you feel great loyalty to. True?
What do you think the number one reason people quit their job is? Anyone?
They don't appreciate the environment.
Their boss. They ever say, the company, Pepsi, I'm never going to drink one again? No, they're going to say, Roger, that guy. That's what happens is people actually leave their work and they cause turnover as simple as not enjoying their boss or their boss's boss or the current alignment of leadership, as we talked about, having outcomes expected through the chain of command all the way through to vision, which is what we talk about with the clarity of vision versus direction, which Dale can talk to a lot about, because this is what you were asking when you said you're the only one in the company. It sounds like that your mission or your outcomes all align all the way up. You're just ready to go like that little staircase guy. That's you. Yeah. But unfortunately, not everyone's as lucky as you. They don't have the great leadership that you've been instilled with.
No, I'm learning, man.
No. Trust me. Your leaders are on point, right? But what Dale's talks about is how if you have every single your first line supervisor, your skip level supervisor, and your skip level, if they're all aligned, it becomes quite easy to accomplish a job, doesn't it? What happens if they're misaligned? Your skip level might like what you're doing, but your boss might not. Does that create tension? Yeah, right.
Cause a lot of miscommunication too.
Miscommunication. What else happens? Does that ever happen to you in an example of this job, another job, something like that, where all the bosses didn't seem like they were on the same page?
Yes.
What happened? Get pulled in different directions. So how do we move in the same direction if we're going different directions? How do we do that? So Dale likes this topic a lot, the managing your supervisor conversation, right, Dale? You could riff on that until the rest of the night.
Yes. It is very discouraging and, in my mind, cruel to do two things to employees. And one is having conflicting sets of expectations. So I have boss A who says I'm supposed to do this thing, and I have some other boss, some other person that I somehow have a relationship within the organization who's motivating me to do something else. Now what am I supposed to do? I've got internal role conflict. I can't make you a happy camper and make you a happy camper, and so whatever I do, I'm going to get yelled at by somebody. Right? Your boss wants you to do X, your customer wants you to do Y. If your customer's not happy, they're going to complain to your boss. That is exceedingly cruel in my mind to do. The other thing equally cruel to do is to give somebody an expectation for performance and not give them the authority to meet that expectation. Don't tell me it is my job to make X happen, and then when I say, okay, now to make X happen, I need to do A, B, and C, you say, no, time out. You don't have the authority to do any of those things. We won't let you control these decisions, but you need to achieve an outcome which can only be achieved if you had the authority to make those kind of decisions.
So before Dale gives all the answers to the test away, I got a question for you guys. I do have a question for you guys on the other side. If you want to talk amongst the group really quickly, what are the disadvantages or the hard parts about an outcome-focused mentality? Does that make sense? What's a disadvantage to this? What makes this hard to implement? What makes it difficult to be outcome-oriented versus just assigning tasks?
You have to put in more work yourself.
Explain.
If I give you a task, it's easy to say, hey, just get this done, and that's it. You know, if I give you the outcome, I got to explain to you why we're doing what we're doing, and I think that's a better way to go at it. But
What happens if you don't know why?
you ask.
Another job you got to do, right?
Yeah. So it just takes on more responsibility upon leaders. But I mean, if that's what you got to do, then I get it.
Yeah. What else? What else from our folks out of town here?
It's hard to track progress.
That's a big one. That's a big one, right? Tasks are really easy. We check boxes. We can mark. We can create our trackers. Anybody like the tracker person here? They build all their trackers and spreadsheets. Or yeah, there's at least like 2 of them. Everybody's got a group. Yeah, the tracker people.
The measuring is an interesting one because it is more complicated to set up the measuring device, but as we have multiple locations, as we have people working from home, we have all that complexity, outcomes become actually easier than tasks. Tasks assume I can see what you're doing. Are you showing up for the office on time? Are you at your office? Do you look like you're busy doing stuff? That's tasks. Outcome is, did we actually get the product delivered from where A to point B? Did we get it there on time? Did sales go up? Did sales go down? Those outcomes are easier to measure if you're not in direct physical contact with people as your spans of control get larger. So it's an interesting dichotomy.
So tracking outcomes and tracking progress is very difficult sometimes, especially ambiguous roles. Like, I don't know, how do you track HR? How are we doing all right? Are people, I guess you got recruiting, you got this happiness factor. How do we track happiness? I don't know. Is that the goal? Or happy employees make more money? Well, engaged employees make us more money, but does that mean they need to be happy? Do we need to have puppies running around and sand to put our feet in when we get stressed out? Or is that overkill? Yeah, we got everybody loves puppies, right? But it becomes an issue when you're starting to figure out what is the outcome that we're looking for, because that becomes your problem, doesn't it? Tasks become their problem. Outcomes become my problem, because I have to think, why are we doing this again? What's the goal here? What's the purpose? And I might need to ask up to get some answers for that, right? And then I have to almost force myself to be aligned with them, don't I? As I start to ask up. And then you can start to align the team. What are some other problems you guys have run into of trying to find more outcome focus versus task? Anybody in here? Thoughts?
Multiple ways to get to that outcome.
Multiple ways, right.
Think about, talk about that.
That's a big issue, right? Because there's multiple ways to skin a cat, right? Is that politically correct anymore?
So is that,
skin a buck.
Is that okay? How do you respond to, okay, I can achieve the outcome you're after, but I'm going to do it a little different way than you would have done it?
Might be a better way. That person
not what happens, right?
No, wait a minute, stop. One of your direct reports may come up with a better way to do things than you did? Well, then why are you in charge? We should probably get this guy to retire. But I think that's a key point, that when you start going by outcomes, your employees very well could come back to you with a different way to achieve the outcome.
What happens if your employees have a lot of good ideas, almost too many good ideas? Then what happens?
They're the experts in the roles that they're in, so they're the ones that know what's going on in the
Okay.
data out stuff. So they're the ones that we should expect to see with some of the new innovative ideas, because they're the ones doing those roles.
What if they say, in order to cut costs this quarter, we need to get Tesla trucks?
I mean, it's got to be, when you look at efficiencies, now you're starting to go down that path.
Okay.
I mean, it's a matter of operational costs and some of those other things. There's a lot of factors in.
So you're putting parameters around what we have a left and right hand limit, and they have freedom to operate within it.
Well, I think everything's got parameters
Yeah.
in business. I mean,
Yeah.
You can't go out and spend $4 billion when you're a $100 million a year company. I mean,
Yeah.
There's parameters along everything we do, but when you're talking about outcomes, we all have a different vision on how we do things. So at the end of the day, I might go down path A and Bob might go down path B, but we end up at the end of the fork of the road at the other side. I mean, we all do things differently in a different way, and it doesn't mean one or the other is wrong. If you have a good vision and a clear vision as a company, although you might do it differently, you end up at the same spot at the end of the day.
Now, how do you draw the line, though, to where, no, this is the way you need to do it? And my textbook example I always use, I'm director of nursing in the hospital, and I'm training a bunch of new nurses. Am I going to say, these are a bunch of drugs, these are a bunch of patients, get them together? No. I'm going to have very, very definitive procedures. You walk into the room, you check the bracelet, you make sure, what's your name, why are you here, this is the med, you know why you're... There's a series of steps before I administer the drug. Why don't I let the nurses just figure out how to do it on their own? Well, maybe not everybody, but there'd be more. Mr. Safety, why are there some things that you say, no, it's not up to you how you want to unload the damn truck. This is the way you got to do it.
Sometimes there's regulations involved. Sometimes it's just the overall safety and the procedures that need to be followed to ensure that there's no accidents. There's definitely unsafe ways that are faster, but at the end of the day, keeping everybody safe and making sure everybody is the most important person here is what the goal is.
Can you make them too safe? Yeah, put bubble wrap around them. Yeah. So there's a tension that exists in business that's always been there, especially with technology companies that run into this all the time. There's this propensity to innovate, to draw ideas and gather information and stuff from people. And then there's things that have and always will work. And that's I mean, you see it manifest out in politics. There's a party that believes in tradition, there's a party that believes in progress, and there's right and wrong in between. And that tension exists everywhere. But that tension also exists within a leadership team too, is that there can be tons of ideas. In fact, when I was managing engineers, there were so many ideas that sometimes I was like, look, we just need to pick one, because these are all great ideas, but we can't do all of them at once. There's multiple possibilities, and they're all probably going to work. So to your point, there's a parameter that you got to set of what we can operate within, and there's ultimately some decisions that happen, right, Dale?
Yeah, and the hard part, again, of leadership is how do you balance those two? I love getting employee input. I love employees coming to me and saying, Dale, I think we ought to X. I love it when employees come to me and say, Dale, I think you're wrong. When I took over running graduate programs in the College of Business, first meeting I was at, I was explaining how I thought they ought to do something different on the marketing side. I actually thought they ought to put more focus on promoting the faculty, because I thought we were the most important part of students making decisions. And one of the staff who had responsibility for marketing starts explaining to me why I'm wrong. Well, I stand up and start clapping, and they were like, oh, okay, this is different. I love it when an employee looks me dead in the eye and says, Dale, I think you're wrong. Because I want the staff to report to me to be comfortable saying, hey, I think you're wrong, here's another perspective. And they find a different way to get to the outcome. I think that's outstanding. Or are there also times, though, where your response is, I want you to do X, and I want you to do it now, and I don't want to talk about it? Is that a legitimate management response to an employee? Is that an arrow that ought to be in your quiver?
If you agree with that, is that okay?
I think it's absolutely. Let me go back. You have children. How many of you at a time with one of your children will say, I want you to do X because I said so? I'm a big fan of because I said so is okay. Now, I'm a fan of engagement. I'm a fan of empowerment. I'm a fan of getting employee input. But I'm not taking out of my quiver of arrows the possibility of saying, because I said so. It's one of the things that makes leadership so doggone difficult. Is this one of the moments that should be because I said so, pass the meds this way because then all the patients don't die? Or is this where I'm willing to listen to a different way to unload the truck and maybe it will be safer? And how do you decide which of those two you're in? Is in my mind not easy. But you constantly have to be moving between those two different arenas because sometimes you need to be the person in charge and sometimes you need to be collaboratively listening. And I don't have an easy answer to say, here's how you tell.
Did you guys ever, this will date myself, I guess, but not so much, but you guys remember towards the end of Adam Sandler's twilight of his career, you know, when it started to fall off, he put that movie out, Big Daddy. Anybody see that movie? Do you remember that movie? What happened in the movie, what was the general concept, right? He adopted this kid, and the kid, and Adam Sandler, who's this kind of like deadbeat guy in the movie, he says to the kid, you know, I didn't really like all the rules and stuff that my dad and life and all that had, so you could just do whatever you want. And this kid who's 5 starts doing whatever he wants, and that becomes kind of the conflict of the film. And then towards the end of the film, he finds out, well, he can't let him do whatever he wants, but there's a middle ground in there. And so at what point do you just let the place run rampant, but also create some kind of structure? I think that's what we're trying to find is what is that right balance to where they can have input, they don't feel like they're being assigned tasks, or people aren't being assigned tasks. Rather, they're actually engaging with the company, but they're participating, but they're not just they're not just running around like Frankenstein in the movie. He renamed himself to Frankenstein. You guys remember that? Yeah, and he renames himself and all this stuff. And at some point, that exists. There's that sweet spot. What are your thoughts? You an Adam Sandler fan?
So,
Happy Gilmore, remember that?
But, you know, this kind of reminds me of Business 101 with the acronyms, the SMART acronym.
Yeah.
Specific, measurable,
yep.
Achievable, realistic, time sensitive. So if you look at that, you can put this into a task type objective to get to that outcome. So if you give them as a leader those parameters within a task, give them the right to achieve that outcome, I think it's kind of the best of both worlds.
So you're suggesting SMART goals are potentially a good outlook to frame it at an appropriate level to where it's not too restrictive, but it's also not so ambiguous that we just run around in chaos.
If you can hit on all 5 of those parameters within a task, you're going to achieve that outcome with letting them get to that outcome.
Everybody familiar with SMART goals at all? Has anybody just heard of that for the first time? So yeah, most people, okay. Yeah. No, I think that's a fantastic point.
The only quibble I have with SMART is the measurable. And I'm a fan of measurable. I'm a research scientist by training, so I'm all about the data. However, I would not, as a manager, want to give up non-measurable expectations. Are there some expectations you have for your employees that you cannot measure? Yes?
Yeah.
Like what?
Customer satisfaction.
Customer satisfaction.
That's a good one.
Say again?
Feelings and emotions.
Feelings and emotions. Say again? Engagement. The staff that report to me at the university are all evaluated on a series of different expectations, but one. There's one expectation that every direct report I have is evaluated on. Did you enhance the quality of work life of the other employees in the unit? Did you enhance the quality of work life of the other people in the unit? What did you do last year that made these people's lives at work better? And you doggone well better have an answer to that question. Is that measurable?
We'll give you some ammo, Megan.
Can I measure that? No. But do I obviously think it is one of the most important things in creating a workplace where people are going to be engaged, want to be there, lower turnover, et cetera, et cetera. I like measurable, but I don't want to discard a goal simply because I cannot measure it. And this gets back to I said so. I'm a big engagement person. I was doing teams and employee empowerment well before it was popular. I was engaged in helping organizations do teams and employee empowerment before AJ was born. That's how long I've been at this damn thing. However, there are times when I think you got to be willing to balance that. Questions?
Well, I want to talk a little bit about what happens when someone's not engaged. Let's say it's someone on your team, they're not engaged, they don't enjoy what they're doing, and there's issues. How would you approach that situation? And you guys can chime in too. Let's put Mankato on the spot. That sounds like a good idea.
How would you engage someone who's not engaged?
Yeah, well, I think you have to engage the employee yourself. Bring them in, talk to them, see what's on their mind. If they don't, maybe they don't understand what the assignment at hand is.
So you're saying there's a personal engagement aspect, right?
Yes.
Okay. And what is that you mentioned that this would be to clarify maybe direction or something like that. What else could there be in that conversation?
Find out what the disconnect is. Try to address what's lacking there. Try to fix it. Prove it.
Yeah, root cause it, right?
Yeah, why do they feel disengaged? What are they missing? What can we do to turn that around?
You noted that you need to have this conversation. My perception is that we often know we need to have the conversation, but we duck having the conversation.
What does that mean, Dale?
What do you think? Is this true? Do people sometimes duck having the candid conversation they need to have with a direct report?
You want to know how you can tell when that's starting to happen? Are people talking around the water cooler, like, hey, this guy's not carrying his weight or whatever it is, and they start to get the little drama and gossip? Well, why has that person not been confronted before that even happened?
I'm not real bright, so I have a simple view of the employees. I think employees fall into three categories. AJ's heard this over and over again. You've got your stars. You've got your employees that are great. They're hitting it out of the park. Their objectives are properly aligned. They got it. They're ready to go. Like this guy. All right? And can you all identify that you got some employees that are stars, that are really good? If you need to start over a new organization, those are the first grabs. They're great employees. Yes? And you got solid citizens. Employees that day in and day out are doing a journeyman job. They're doing a good job of making it happen. Sometimes they exceed expectations a bit. Sometimes they're below expectations a bit. But clearly, on average, they're meeting expectations. Yes? And I will phrase this one very carefully. In the organizations you have worked in, so you do not have to answer for this organization, have you had coworkers, subordinates, that were dead wood? Employees that you would be better off without. That if they marched into HR and said, I'm going to be leaving the organization going someplace else, and HR did anything other than wave goodbye and organizing the go-away party, you'd go in and slap them. You should not be slapping employees, let me just be clear. Especially HR. How many of you have had coworkers at some point in your career that were dead wood? What percentage of employees in most organizations are ballpark dead wood?
Like should be canned on the spot.
You would be better off if they walked out the door.
If you were king for a day, gonzo.
15%?
5%? What else? 10? 5?
What's the scale from 1 to 10?
Well, what percentage? So it's 0 to 100.
About 30.
When
Honest
we have
man.
done surveys
Honest
of
man.
this and asked the question, what we tend to hear is about 20%. Now here's what's fascinating. If you ask the folks on the line, the folks making the product, the first line employees, supervisors, next, managers, CEO, there's a direct relationship between level in the organization and what percentage of the employees they think are dead wood. Who thinks there's more dead wood? CEO or line employees? Line employees. And why line employees? Come on. They see them. And why doesn't the CEO know there's that much dead wood? Not out there every day. And everybody lies to their boss. Because if I go to my boss and say, boss, it turns out I got some employees that are dead wood, what's my boss going to expect me to do? Have a difficult conversation and deal with my employees that are dead wood. And I don't want to have a difficult conversation, so I don't tell my boss that I have dead wood. One more question about the dead wood. The dead wood you have known in organizations, are these all like new employees that just got hired and they're just kind of working through the system? Or some of these people like fairly senior? How many of you say there's some fairly senior people that are dead wood? How does that happen? How does it happen that you've been working for you've got people who've been working for an organization for 10, 20, 30 years and are not meeting expectations?
You never had that deadwood conversation with them. You avoided it. You let it happen, and it keeps on happening, and they feel like this is just what it is. And instead of, that's why I told Matt, I'm like, hey, I don't lie to you. Because at the end of the day, if you're not willing to take if you're doing something wrong, if that beginner stage employee is not knowing something, or there's dead wood, maybe it's something that you're doing that you didn't prepare them right. Maybe that's why they feel like that. And if you're not willing to tell your boss that and have him give you some constructive feedback besides just the task of,
great,
I gotta get better at training guys and I gotta have this conversation, and you're kind of cutting yourself short from an opportunity of you learning something about yourself as well.
It's a critical point. How do you know if you had a good day at work? When you're driving home at the end of the day, what would cause you to say, yep, I had a good day at work today? I'm working on the assumption you're not dead wood. What caused you to say, I had a good day? Anybody?
When you accomplish a couple things you wanted to
You accomplish the things you want to get done. Let's assume I am dead wood. What is my objective for the end of the day? Didn't get fired. Right? I mean, right? I'm dead wood. I know I'm dead wood. Everybody else, if you ask everybody in the organization, write down the names of the dead wood, you'd see the same names over and over again. People know who the dead wood is. They know they're dead wood. Their objective is not to get fired. Think about that for a minute. Think about psychologically, quality of life, how it must feel to go to work with the objective of being to lay low enough that I don't get canned. How depressing is that? I think you made a critical point. Back to these candid conversations that you folks can tend to duck and not have. Yeah, you probably have an organization, a responsibility of the organization to have them. But let's think for a minute about this person that you need to have the conversation with.
Let's think about their life.
Exactly.
They're going 8 hours a day, right, Dale? I mean,
if you don't have the chutzpah to sit down with them and say, hey, we've got a problem. There's an expectation, I think you properly defined it, the discussion out there, that, hey, here's an expectation, the expectation's not being met, we can talk a little bit more about how you have it. But if you're not willing to have that conversation, have they got any chance of growing and developing? You owe it to the dead wood to have the conversation that says, let's be clear, what are the expectations? Let's make sure everybody understands the expectations. Here's your level of performance relative to the expectations. Here's the gap. Now, what are we, pronouns are critical, what are we going to do to shrink that gap?
I'm going to figure out what you need to get that job done right. If I got to retrain you, if I got to do whatever I got to do, but I'm not going to call you that, but I'm just going to, I got to retrain you, I got to figure it out.
And it may be training, it may be raw materials, it may be I didn't understand what the expectations were.
You don't call them dead wood, but what do you say? How do you talk to them about their performance?
You just be honest. When I first jumped into this position, one thing I did was I would stand next to something that I thought there was a problem with, and I would say, just 2 seconds, look at that. Do you think that we look better than the competition? Like, what do you think of that? Are you proud of your work? And my supervisor, a couple years back, that's one thing that he instilled in me. He always told me when we would call and say, hey, we're off. Can we get off a little early? He'd say, yeah, if you're proud of your work. And that stuck with me because am I really proud of that? Can I do a little bit better? So just, there's always room for improvement. You might learn how to ride a horse in a day. I might take a week and a half.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, we'll still be riding horses at the end of the road,
Does it get easier to correct that if you delay it with time?
I don't think it gets easier. I think it's all on the person. Like you said earlier, you gotta want.
Well, now let's say there's some dead wood and this person's been here 10 years and you let the conversation go. Does the conversation get easier with time?
No, it gets tougher.
Why?
Because you've been procrastinating that conversation. Now you've thought of every answer.
And that person's going one more day not getting fired, right? So they're I'm doing all right. And they don't even know that they're doing the wrong thing, right?
It was acceptable for so long, it's not.
Somebody comes in out of nowhere and says, you're doing the wrong job. I've been doing this for 15 years and it's been okay.
So when's the right time?
The moment
you realize it.
The moment you find out that there's something going wrong, you gotta attack it right there.
Do you think everybody does it the moment they notice it?
No.
When do you think they normally do it?
When they get time. Or
When is that?
When they make time.
When do they make time?
When it becomes a problem.
When they have to. Yeah, usually when it becomes a problem, correct.
My goal is to have my employees have the life I have. I'm excited to come to work, I'm excited to go home. And they weren't that way when I first got into my role, and now I think I know my employees are generally excited to come to work.
Why do you think? So let's talk about that for a second. Why are you excited to come to work, and why were you always excited to come to work?
Wasn't always excited.
Okay, so you weren't excited before, but you grew into the excitement. Why weren't you before, and why are you now?
Just the passion for the job that I have.
Okay.
The results that need to get done. Just seeing the satisfaction of the customers.
So you enjoy the progress, the benefit of the customer. Okay, what was different about when your employees were not excited? What were they like?
To your envelope story, go deliver this product to John's bar. Door's locked. Come back, bring the product back.
Yep.
Now they're excited to come to work. They know that my expectations of them are better. So instead of a locked door, they're going to pick up a phone, call that number. Nobody answers there. They're going to go next door to the Crow. Anybody that has a key to John's bar, they're going to find a way to get that.
You know what happened, AJ?
I think he shifted like a lot more task focused.
I think he's got more serotonin.
Oh no, are we going there?
Yeah, go there.
All right. Well, well anyway, that's fantastic. I think there's a lot of really good stuff we touched on here with if you delay the conversation, it becomes even harder, right? You keep kicking it down the road. And you also, not only does it become harder just to personally have that conversation, it becomes a much more difficult person to deal with because you've reinforced. What if you waited a year to have that conversation? They would say, well, last year I was doing okay, and you waited a whole year to tell me this. You could have actually changed that behavior and changed their outcomes with them. So just to conclude that thought, I think that's really really important. Now, what Dale's talking about with serotonin, anybody know what serotonin is? Biologists in the room? Nobody? Okay. Serotonin is a chemical. There's several chemicals that operate within our body that control our mood. Serotonin, oxytocin, endorphin, and dopamine. Dopamine is that checklist right there. That's get something done, that feels good. Dopamine's also the little red bell on your notifications that you want to click on, you don't know why. That's also dopamine. And Zuckerberg has figured out a way to engineer dopamine. That's another rant for another day. Serotonin, however, is it's a chemical that actually controls the placement of yourself or your perception of yourself, your confidence in a social hierarchy. So when you're a supervisor or boss, you get a little boost of serotonin. When you're in charge, you got boost of serotonin, and it improves your confidence over time. But serotonin's a complicated animal. And it can actually control a lot of different behaviors when you can figure out ways of taking care of yourself and improving it. In fact, people wonder, how come, when someone delivers a Medal of Honor and they tell the story that they face inevitable death to save this person and somehow miraculously survived? Why would they do that to save someone or many others? Anybody know? Why someone would face death to save a group of people?
The achievement behind it. Sometimes you just do it.
Okay, achievement. Why would you just do it? Just instinct? Exactly, right? Serotonin's what's operating. That's the achievement chemical, right? That's the placement, like the sacrifice, the ability to stand strong. That's the chemical serotonin. Well, serotonin has a lot of relationship with leadership, doesn't it, Dale?
It absolutely does. And I talked about the help. Well, the serotonin to some extent is the chemical that helps explain why we have this huge need to help. But serotonin also drives what we think of as our happiness checkpoint. All of us have a certain happiness level, a status level, a self-perception, and
achievement.
And people with high levels of serotonin that have a high happiness set point tend to stay relatively happy, no matter what happens. I have a high happiness set point. I don't know, won the genetic lottery, what have you, and some other factors. But so when something bad happens in Dale world, I very quickly might become a little depressed and bummed, but it goes away exceedingly quickly, and I very quickly go back to being very happy. One of the things I say is that Dale world is different than reality, but it's much nicer in Dale world. And this, it's true. I like it here. But people who have a high happiness set point very rarely, never, get upset for very long. They quickly come back to their happiness set point. As a leader, you are faced with a challenge at work because you're frustrated because some of your employees quit, because there's a customer who's upset, there's a problem on the production line, something bad happens, right? Bad things happen at work from time to time, right?
Not here.
Happiness set point says, if you got a high happiness set point, you fairly quickly take a deep breath and say, okay, well, how do we fix it? How do I use this as a learning opportunity? How do I move forward from this point? Low serotonin level folks tend to go, yeah, well, life sucks. It's bad. It's always going to be bad. And there's nothing I can do about it. And what I heard in your story was there's been a shift in your serotonin level. You are and I'm not a psychiatrist, but you are a happier person today than you were 10 years ago. Yeah. Why? There is more serotonin floating around in your brain, which causes positive feelings, etc., and gives you a different approach to challenges than you would have had 10 years ago. Does that make sense?
You know, one thing that actually improves your serotonin levels is recognition of achievement. So if you can recognize or stop for a moment and actually look back on what's happened, it allows your serotonin to calibrate itself in the social hierarchy. We had a big win, we had a big goal, somebody knocked something out of the park, I'm being recognized publicly for something. Some people might hate that, but oftentimes it still places you as in the hierarchy. And serotonin is very closely related to happiness. So your achievement levels, what we're doing here is we're tying together that achievement is also related to happiness. So the goals and progress are also tied into the satisfaction someone might have in the workplace. People that are mopey down in the dumps or whatever might not be engaged enough or challenged enough. They might not be achieving enough or recognized for what they're doing. All those things come together and can result in someone being mopey, disengaged, and not excited. So when we talk about how you want to engage with someone is understanding if we're challenging them. Are they achieving something? If they are achieving something, are they being properly recognized for that achievement, whether it's publicly, whether it's privately, whatever that person likes to feel? How are we making sure that they're understanding that you have arrived at these goals? And that's a great way of hacking this serotonin game.
And the challenge needs to be very carefully calibrated. I do lots of training seminars, and I'll be in a room with a bunch of CEOs and say, okay, I got this really difficult problem. Do you think you can solve it? And the CEOs are all shooting their hand up, yeah, I can solve it. I'm like, well, I haven't given you the problem yet. How do you know you can solve it? Well, I have staff. I'll assign it to them. But they are just so self-confident that without knowing what the problem is, they know they can get to a solution. They have what we call a strong internal locus of control. Okay? When you were a kid and your mother said you can do anything you want to do if you put your mind to it, some people believe that, some people didn't. It turns out that about 20% of the US population has an internal locus of control. Not 20% of this room. Much higher percentage of this room has an internal locus of control. But 20% of the US population has an internal locus of control. They believe that if they put their mind to a challenge, they can find a way to make it happen. Now, part of that is you get lucky and you're born with plenty of serotonin. But as AJ has described, you are faced with a challenge. You meet that challenge and you're successful. Oh, challenge, effort, success. Next time a challenge comes along, you're more inclined to put forth effort and have success. I'm not a technology person. I'm 66. I do not like technology. I'm convinced there are only so many technology genes within a family, and my older brother sucked up all the technology genes, right? He was a programmer for Microsoft. He literally is a total technology geek. I am not. Podcast. About a year ago, I was doing a training program for Propel, a young professionals group in Oshkosh. AJ was in the room. And when it was over, AJ and one of the other people said, Dale, you're not bad at this stuff. You should do podcasts. What was my reaction? What's a podcast? That's exactly my reaction. That's how far behind the curve I was. But having conversations, et cetera, having a lot of coaching and help from AJ and the other people who help make this thing happen, Madison in particular, those two I'm doing these podcasts. And they're not bad.
Yeah, you're going to check them out. We got a plug at the end to make sure you listen to Dale's podcast.
But because I was able to do these podcasts and it's happening, then the next time a challenge comes along, I'm more likely to say, oh, well, if I could do podcasts, maybe I can figure this one out too. You're more willing to accept the challenge. How many of you are familiar with the expression, you can't fail if you don't try?
Anybody agree with that expression? So you don't fail if you don't try, so why try?
Isn't that kind of fascinating? Now, to some extent, that's not the way your minds work. Your minds tend to work, you're going to put forth the effort and try, and you're convinced you're going to succeed, because most of you have internal locus of control. That's what gets you into this room, and getting you in this room, it gives you an internal locus of control. This is a circular thing. This is my point, that many folks are hesitant to face a big challenge. If I come to you and say, I got this difficult challenge, this is going to be really hard, don't know if you can make it happen. Many of you are like, oh, put me in, coach. This is a great opportunity to prove how damn good I am. 80% of the world would say, oh, this is an opportunity for me to fail.
I got a question.
Best for me not to try.
What happens when you see the person that's itching for a challenge, and you're the leader, and you've got these people in your team? Who gets more challenges? Probably the person with the track record of the success with the challenges, right?
You go to the people.
Does that anybody do that? The person that'll get it done the fastest, you're getting all the work, and then what happens after that? Well, this person's overloaded, and now we have the deadwood over here not being challenged, perpetuating the problem, and we're in this vicious cycle where the hard workers are doing more, getting more serotonin, getting stressed out in the process. In the meantime, we've got the deadwood over here getting no challenges, getting more lethargic, more lazy.
Because they're learning that I don't seem to be successful at making things happen. So the key for the many folks is to give them challenges, but not too big. Don't give them this huge, big challenge that's very ambiguous, because that's going to feel overwhelming to them. Even though it may not feel overwhelming to you, for lots of folks, that kind of a challenge is going to be overwhelming. So you need to give them baby steps. Can you achieve X? Small. They're successful achieving X. Now you give them X plus. Now you give them the next one. Now you give them and you keep helping them gaining a little more self-confidence in their ability to take on a challenge. And every time they take on a challenge, they're going to get a little boost of that serotonin, and they're going to become a little more comfortable with the next challenge. But you got to be careful you don't overload them with some big challenge, because they're going to bolt. They're going to shut down. They're going to feel like they can't possibly make it.
And as we talked about, the challenge, once it's complete, what do? We recognize it, right? Because otherwise, we never arrive. We never arrive if we just keep doing things and no one ever appreciates it. No. And is it just how do we recognize them exactly? What does recognizing them for the achievement look like?
Showing them the appreciation.
How do you show appreciation?
In front of their peers.
In front of peers? Okay.
No, wait, time out. Does everybody want to be recognized in front of their peers?
No.
My wife would hate that. She would hate that. How do you know how to recognize a particular individual?
Learn, you get to know them, you ask questions, you learn how they want to be recognized.
How do you like being recognized?
I'm a thank you type person.
Thank you. Words of affirmation.
And my favorite thank you is a handwritten note that we send home. I do not want to just say thank you at work, and I don't want to give you something here. I want to send it home. Because if I send it home, assuming you have a significant other, oh, there's a letter, there's a note for you from the company. Oh, well, what is that? Oh, go ahead and open it, honey. And it's a note from your boss saying you're wonderful. How cool is it to open a letter from the boss saying you're wonderful that you get to share with your significant under?
Awesome. Or your kids.
Or your kids, or the neighbor, or everybody who slows down long enough to tell them.
The dog.
I think we tend to forget the significant others. When I want to reward somebody, I would really like to do a reward that they get to share effectively with the significant others, the other people that are important in their life, whatever that may be. One company I worked with, and this was not my idea, I wish I could claim credit for it, they send a survey out to their employees every year. And I love the way the survey starts. If you would happen to do something right, how should we reward you? Which I think is just great wording to begin with. And then it asks them, would you want public recognition? Would you like it private? Would you like, a sweatshirt? What size? Would you, what would be the ways that you would want to be recognized? And I don't know you need to do a survey, but the ask, because everybody ain't the same. Everybody doesn't want to be rewarded the same way.
Yeah. I think that the point is that whatever makes them feel appreciated. I saw some of you taking notes on the idea of after they've achieved something, make sure they're recognized. But if it's just, they did something, we need to recognize them. Or is it you genuinely appreciated what they did? And I think there's a difference, right? How can you tell the difference if you're genuinely recognized versus not genuinely recognized? What are some indicators you can usually feel with your supervisors or other people or your spouse or whatever?
Raise. Cash.
That's okay. Good. We went there. I'm glad. That's good. But seriously, a company parts with their hard-earned money. They part with their hard-earned money to show you. So that takes what? Justification to be able to prove that this employee is valuable enough to receive cash compensation. So you need to be keeping track of these things. You need to know what kind of value this person's contributing. Cash,
are there other people that cash may not be important?
What's some other things?
Sometimes a thank you, like Josh said, is very hard.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Words of affirmation. He might be a gift guy. I don't know.
Yeah, just an incentive and doesn't have to be a material. It could be words, just showing up to that place instead of calling them and saying, hey, thank you for busting out that store, even though it was your job to do it,
Yeah.
Showing up sometimes, showing them that you're making time to give this thank you, like a little further rather than just saying, hey, thanks for showing up to your shift.
Yeah. What are other ways you could show appreciation? Anyone familiar with the 5 love languages? We had a couple saying words of affirmation is one of them. Anybody else know them? What are some other ones?
People like
Food, absolutely. I'm a big fan of, we did a really good job, this was a great month, this was a great quarter, and everybody gets pizza for lunch. And if the most senior people in the organization are serving the pizza, that's best. I'm a big fan of food.
I like it. Food. We got thank yous. We've got money. What else?
Rochester, do you have any other ideas?
Rochester.
I know you do.
Because you've heard them.
I've heard them.
A one-on-one handshake thanking them.
One-on-one handshake. So that's the personal recognition, right? From somebody that hopefully, for lack of a better word, has significance or matters to the person, that it means something coming from them, right? Certainly a supervisor, a skip level, another employee that they respect and appreciate. Yeah, what else are some good ways of recognizing achievement?
Yeah, we got a person share it as a best practice.
Say again, I didn't quite catch it. Did you catch it?
Pointing out what they did and asking them to share with others how they did it.
Teaching, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's a great one.
Yep.
Putting them in a perspective where they can become the expert because they had learned and done something before. Yeah, that's something we would commonly do in the military with junior enlisted, is they would come in and if they were demonstrate a certain level of proficiency at a task, we'd have them train others that might be new to the task. So that's a fantastic one. Anything else from Rochester? It's got to be a couple more. There's lots of ways we can recognize people. Let's do one more. Certificate of achievement? Sure. Put something on the I Love Me wall. We have the I Love Me page. We got the I Love Me wall. Got a lot of I Love Me things. Know a lot about.
What about combining food with recognition? What about lunch with the CEO? If I'm driving truck for you and I've done something amazing and you come to me and say, Dale, you did a really wonderful job of X. So next Tuesday, I've arranged you and the CEO are going to have lunch. What do you think?
I think it sounds good, but it'd be tough to execute.
Why?
I'm not saying impossible, I'm just saying.
Doesn't the CEO eat lunch? Has he got more important things to do than have lunch with the employees?
Does that have to be lunch?
It doesn't have. It could be breakfast. It could be dinner. I don't care.
Happy hour.
But happy hour. We got to be careful how far that goes. Let's assume I'm working in the plant. I'm working in the bottling operation. And I get an opportunity to have lunch with the CEO. Am I going to tell that story?
Yes.
How many times am I going to tell that story? More than once. Over and over again. Now, I know that senior management doesn't tend to think of having lunch with them as an amazing reward, which is probably good, because if they did, their ego would be totally out of control. But it is. Spending time with someone up the food chain is a pretty cool thing. If you did something really great when you were at West Point, and the commandant of the West Point said, AJ, that was a really great job of XYZ, or somebody told you this, you're going to have lunch next week with the commandant, would that have been cool?
Yeah, I'd be scared though. General officers, when you always get in trouble for everything the second you're talking to them for some reason. The uniform's wrong, you're not standing right, everything's always off. But yes, to your point, the recognition of a commandant at West Point would have been very significant for sure. And I think that's you make a great point that something that doesn't necessarily have to be that expensive, though you could argue that the CEO's time for an hour is quite expensive.
Yes.
But certainly some kind of senior level position, able to interact with people on a more personal level over something like lunch or cocktails or breakfast or whatever happens to be, can be really significant. It can be stories, and they can share those, and they can share what they learned, and they can get to know each other personally, and it could really manifest into something very special for that person's contribution to the organization. And that also creates a level of loyalty and trust with the company. Being able to trust senior leadership certainly is going to contribute to that line that we see where the outcome in alignment. So I really like that idea. Anybody have anything else that they wanted to add on maybe some ideas for how you can recognize achievement or make that person feel like what they did was added value to the company or to the team? Mankato, we got anything? There's got to be a couple brewing over there. I can see it. Say again.
Thank you. Good job, man. Let's run your roof. That's where I was at.
That's, you guys mentioned it before.
The which one? Sorry.
Was it what the behind the scenes handshake of thank yous, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's huge.
Right on. Cool. But yeah, so one of the other things that I think people miss out is there was a social scientist who's a business scholar as well named Cotter, and when they looked at teams and how you could actually fire teams up and get them moving in a direction, very relevant in sports. So I played football and I went through a coaching change my junior year of college, and one of the things that we learned was leading an organization during change. And Cotter's got the 8 steps of leading organizations through change. We don't have to go through all the steps, but the first one is to create a sense of urgency. Why do we actually do this? Like getting back to purpose, getting back to tasks, we've come around this question, why? In fact, Simon Sinek wrote a book called Start With Why, specifically addressing how important it is to know why you're doing what you're doing. So if we're looking into the psyche of somebody that we're working with, and we're not understanding why they're doing what they're doing, it becomes extremely difficult to persuade them, to motivate them to go to a new level. So what are some ways that you can figure out these different motivations for people and create some sense of urgency in their day-to-day routine?
Showing them the results up there.
Okay. So winning breeds winning, right? Alabama wins all the time because they're used to winning and this is what we do. And that's enough urgency to keep winning because it's almost a running from losing at that point, right? So there's urgency and success. What else? What else can we do to build urgency, to inspire, to kind of create sparks that we can build off of? Because if we can't get them to get to that small challenge, that initial piece of achievement, how are we going to continue to build upon it? If we can't get the rock moving, if we can't get the snowball falling down the hill, we've got to create a spark, we've got to create urgency. What are some other tools we can do?
4 hands are better than 2, so if you really want to get it done, you got to lead by example.
That's right. Show the flag, baby. That's right. Show the flag. Get in there. I'm going to...
You're not just giving them something to do, you're also being a part of it. You see that they're lacking in that department, and step in there with them, put your feet in the mud with them.
Yeah. Awesome.
Now, we all have responsibilities and things we got to do, but just showing that little bit of effort.
I'm gonna do it, so you can do it. Let's do it together, right? That's a spark. That creates urgency. So we got success. We got working with them together, showing them by example. What are some other tools we got?
Collaborating and creating competition.
Competition, huge, right? Who's competitive here? All right. So Elle runs the Best Buy over in Oshkosh. He creates internal store competitions and statewide competitions, and ends up creating Oshkosh to be the #1 store in the state of Wisconsin. Isn't that right, Elle? That's right. Rochester's the Best Buy territory, so we got to be careful. They might start going there to get their laptops and stuff. Now, but the idea is to create something that's going to inspire, ignite them. So we've got competition, we've got getting hands dirty, getting in there with them. What are some other tools?
As you're thinking about these, you got to remember that there are two boxes these things fit into. When people make decisions, do people tend to make decisions based on data and information? Or do they make decisions and then find data and information to support the decision? I mean, we teach you that it's data-driven information makes decisions happen.
Emotions drive decisions, and then you use data to back up the emotions that you feel to prove your point.
We know that that's how the majority of decisions are made. So when you're coming up with urgency, a case for action, a reason why you need to change, some of it is data. Some of it is, look, here's the injury rate we've had. Injury rate's too high. That's not good. We've got to do something to change it. Here's the data. But you've also got to give people an emotional reason to change.
Especially the deadwood that's in their job for 10 years and has been doing nothing the whole time. Why would they change? What's going to be the urgency? Is it going to be scolding them? Maybe. I don't know. But is it going to be something different? What's going to get them to create a lasting change? And you mentioned it earlier. You got to know them, right? You got to
ignite the fire in them. You have to get them excited about.
How do you know what's going to ignite them?
Again, you go back to getting to know your people and how they operate and what drives them to be motivated to do what it is that you're doing.
Are people more motivated by the possibility of reward or the threat of punishment?
Yes.
Let me go back. For those of you when you were in school studying, did you, when you were deciding whether it was time to stop studying, were you asking yourself, if I stop, maybe I will get a bad grade, I should keep studying? Or were you saying, if I keep studying, maybe I'll get a good grade? Was it fear of a bad grade or hope for a good grade? Fear. I think both are at play. I don't think they're the same for everybody. Some people are more fear-driven. Some people are more reward-driven. But in my mind, one of the things I put on the table with dead wood, and I like if I'm addressing dead wood, I'm having this difficult conversation, I'm going to say, hey, here's the bar, what can we do, etc. But if we've had that conversation and a month from now we still got this problem, I'm going to come back and have the conversation again. Same thing. Here's the bar, here's your performance, there's a problem, what can we do to solve the problem? FYI, your job's in jeopardy. If we can't find a way, if we can't find a way to solve this problem, your employment in this organization is at risk. I think you owe it to them to note that this is an important enough deal that their job could be in jeopardy. Do people like change?
Not everybody.
How do people respond when they're given an opportunity to change?
They try to find all the problems with the change.
So, how do you put on your socks and shoes in the morning? Are you a sock, shoe guy or a sock, shoe?
Sock.
Shoe. Yeah, well, you're doing it wrong. It turns out that he is not. Up till now, I thought he was relatively bright, but now he's clearly fallen off the cliff. It turns out it is faster to go sock, shoe than it is sock, shoe. I mean, it is. That's just, that's a thing. Alan Alda, MASH, Scientific America, or Scientific American Frontiers, they did a study, and it is faster to go sock, shoe than it is sock, shoe. That's a fact. It is faster. What are you thinking? So are you thinking you're going to change?
The only reason that I would say no is because my shoes are at the door, so I put my socks in right by the bed, and as soon as I walk in, shoes are out the door.
I'm hearing you, man.
And my wife would kill me if my shoes came into my bedroom.
What if the socks went to the door, though? You could make the socks go to the door.
And then my wife would kill me.
Okay, change.
Yeah. I try.
When given an opportunity to change, when I ask people about socks and shoes, do they tend to seriously consider changing the way they do their socks and shoes? Or do they start coming up with explanations for why the way they're doing it now is the way they're going to do it?
Come up with explanations.
How many of you go to the gym, work out? When you go to the gym, you go sock, shoe, or you go sock, shoe when you're, what?
I don't wear shoes.
When you're heading home after you've worked out. You wear sandals leaving the gym?
Yep.
Nah, that doesn't work. do you go to the gym, work out? When you're leaving, if you shower and you're leaving the gym, do you go sock, shoe?
I just take my shoes off and I put on sandals too.
I go sock, shoe. Yes, always.
Even at the gym?
Yeah, like after I'm done showering. Yeah.
You put on both socks.
Before I put my shoes on.
So you're putting your sock on that dirty gym floor in the locker room. What my observation is, and you got to be careful because if you're checking out how other guys are getting dressed in the locker room, you can get into trouble. But my observation is the vast majority of people in the men's locker room, I do not know what happens in the women's locker room, go sock, shoe. They may go sock, shoe at home, but in the locker room they go sock, shoe because they don't want to put their sock on the dirty gym floor. So most people actually do it two different ways, but they didn't think about doing it two different ways unless I pointed it out. People don't like change. You go to your employees and through some difficult conversation, you're asking them to change their behavior. Their natural, human, inbred, environmental behavioral response is, nope, don't want to change. That is a normal, natural thing to do. So AJ is absolutely right. You have to give them urgency. You have to give them some reason to change, or else they're not going to do it.
And we heard examples from you guys. You could lose your job. You could do all sorts of different things. There's all sorts of reasons why they should change, which is the next part. People don't necessarily respond to tasks, but they respond to reasons. So a friend of mine at 30 years old had a really serious heart condition because he ate terribly. He goes into the doctor after they do a scan and they figured out that he has a serious heart condition. Well, the doctor didn't start with, you need to start eating better. Instead, the doctor said, you got any kids? He says, yeah, I've got 2 daughters. Would you like to see those daughters graduate high school? He says, yeah. Would you like to see those daughters maybe send them off to get married, walk them down the aisle? He says, yeah. He says, if you don't change what you're doing from a diet standpoint, you will not see those daughters get married, see them graduate high school or college. He started with the reason. The doctor started with reasons because that's going to get him to change. Not telling him what to do, not eat healthier. Here, you can eat some kale salads like Dale does. That's what you can see. But giving them reasons. So figuring out what those reasons are, knowing people, knowing their reasons, and aligning those perfectly is what's going to eventually help create some of that spark in itself.
Now, I'm convinced that if you're going to live your life to the fullest, you have to be well aware of the fact you're going to die. And I realize you would probably all get it right on multiple choice, are you going to die? But we know that most people don't act that way. Most people don't think about their own mortality. You are going to die. You only have so many days left. I don't know how many it is, but you only got so many left. What you did today damn well better be important because you traded a day of your life to do it. I think it's important to be aware of that. As AJ is well aware, I keep track of how many days I got left. I have 9,004 left. That's what I got, 9,004. Now, how do I know 9,004? That's when my youngest grandchild, Sterling, will turn 30. I want to see all of my kids make it, my grandkids make it to 30. That's my objective in life. I think there are more grandkids coming, so that number's probably going to go up, which means I got to spend more damn time at the Y so that I can be in shape so that I can make the 9,004. What's the objective? But you got to be thinking about your own mortality, aware of that fact, and thinking about what you're doing in order to move this thing forward. You need to help your employees to be thinking about what they're trying to accomplish at work, how that meshes with life, so that they're going to get the most out of the deal.
So we've talked about a lot of different things, we've talked about a lot of different tools, but we wanted to give you at least something to try if you've been trying this or continue to try. But these are some of the things that we came up with for what next steps might actually look like. Now, I've got a lot of opinions on this. I think we're going to talk about this for a minute. But the first one is empathy and compassion. Does anybody know the difference between the two definitions? Not even our HR help over here knows the difference. Anybody? You guys have heard these words a lot, right? What does empathy mean?
I feel pain. Empathy is you feel bad for somebody. Compassion is that you're going to do something to help.
Boom.
Well done.
Perfect, right? So I see this float around corporate circles all the time is empathy, empathy, empathy. Empathy, in fact, is actually a lot less. It's just the ability to feel what they're feeling. Very important, but compassion requires a result. It requires something you want to do about it, which could actually change what you do. For example, maybe this isn't a thing anymore. I don't know, my kids aren't old enough, but spanking your child, for example. You're not doing it because it feels good or it's wrong, but you're doing it because there's a long-term result that could benefit that kid from showing them discipline in the way you decide to raise them. That would be an example of compassion. Empathy would be like, just let them have the candy bar because that's what's going to feel good right now, and we can feel that together.
And you know they're upset because they... How many of you as a parent have done things that cause your children to dislike you? And you had enough empathy to know that they disliked you. But you had enough compassion to do it anyway. If you don't have empathy, you're not going to be able to get to compassion. But empathy in itself is simply not enough. You got to go the next step. You got to do something about it.
Well, what happens if we don't even have empathy? Which a lot of people really don't care, right? Well, yeah, if you have none at all as a person, you're going to be on one of those Netflix crime dramas. But if you've got a little bit of empathy and can use that in your day-to-day work, there's a lot of, the old school belief is, get stuff done. But then there's the ability to understand and feel where people are coming from. And I think that's what we're talking about when you say to know people, to know your people, to get it. I know what you're going through. I understand. That's the starting point. Because you can't get to compassion without at least that. And if you can't at least get there, how are you going to assess or feel or understand what the current climate looks like, right? So what are some examples of demonstrating empathy for people that work for you or work with you?
Examples of before you messed up at, or things that you did wrong, and how you learned from it and how it benefited as well.
Yeah, so maybe examples of, I've been through something similar, so you can trust that I have been there and feel that, to maybe persuade them that you get it. Okay. What else?
I'm a big fan of just articulating it back.
Listening?
If I perceive this properly, you are frustrated because. If I perceive this properly, what I just said aggravated you because. If I perceive it properly, you really like X. This is what's going on. And if you can just share, this is my perception of sort of your emotional state now, that helps them understand that, yeah, this person does empathize with me. They do get it.
Yeah, I got an example of today. I had a couple plans for the morning, and then I stopped by one of the stores just to check on one of the guys that's been helping out Sound a lot. And then when I got there, it was a little bit of rough shape, but I know the guy does a great job. He's always like really good energy. So I stopped him from working for a second, and I said, I sometimes realize when it's a lot, you might feel a little bit overwhelmed. And he said, that's exactly what happened. He understood completely. He saw that I understood where he was coming from. And I said, well, no worries, that's why I'm here. Even though I got some stuff to do, I'm just gonna bust these couple things out with you. At the end of the day, like by the time I was leaving, he was in a way better attitude than previously, because you could see the weight lift off his shoulders, like, okay, I'm not doing a bad job. It's just, we all have stressful moments, we all have rough days, we all have times where we can't find our head, and so that was me empathizing, but at the same time, my compassion was to like work with him until I saw that he
you did something about it too. You felt it, you let him know you feel it. As Dale mentioned, being able to listen. Somebody told me one time that there was a study that actually found that the people felt most inspired when they were listened to. That's an odd stat, right? That just simply listening to the point where I get it, like repeating it back in your words and making sure that they hear you repeat it back so they know you heard it and got it and it sunk in, is actually something that's inspirational to people.
They don't care what you think until they think that you care. Thinking that you care about them as a human being is step number one. Until then, I don't care what you think.
So there's this level of demonstrating that connection or that understanding with somebody. So having empathy and compassion. Now here's the thing, right? So sometimes people make little note cards and post them and hand them out to supervisors and stuff. You think people like on the line or first level don't know that you have these little like postcards or that you're going through these classes? Sometimes they know. So when you try to, okay, I gotta be empathetic right now. I get it, it's tough, but we gotta get it done. They know that. That's not empathy, that's just, I gotta pretend to be empathetic.
You're being nice, that's BS.
That's BS, right? It's truly, the word empathy is to feel it with them and to understand. And I think that requires a level of authenticity. Certainly when you have those hard conversations with individuals.
And being willing to own, and you noted it, your own limitations. that I'm willing to share with people that, yeah, these are my frustrations, these are my shortfallings, these are the things that create angst for me. That helps make you a person to them.
Yeah.
You can't fake it.
So we touched on this a little bit, but part of compassion is what we were talking before about having those difficult conversations. So Dale brought up the dead wood, or not only dead wood, but moderate employee performance and fantastic employee performance. All of them will require difficult conversations at different levels. You can have a fantastic employee do something really dumb. Believe me.
Been there, done that.
Yeah. That requires a conversation, so you're not off the hook if you've just got all rock stars. And I think that what we wanted to really emphasize today is the importance of not only having hard conversations, but the frequency by which those conversations are happening. Someone told me one time, you should never be surprised by your end of the year review and merit raise. That shouldn't be a surprise. If that's a surprise to somebody, something wasn't happening. And I think that that's something that's really important when we decide how we have those conversations.
One of my clients every few years role plays it. And they have people switch roles. So I report to you, and this year you play me and I'll play you. And I try and say what I think you would say, and you try and respond as I would. And if they've done this right, their employees nail it pretty close. And I ask them, how does that go? And they said, well, it's generally good, but it creates some angst because some of the employees do a really good job of impersonating the supervisor. It's clear they've been in a bar somewhere doing that before. This isn't the first time that's gone down. But it shouldn't be a surprise. You should absolutely be able to role play it. This is a confirmation of discussions we've had throughout the year. This is not a source of surprise.
Is anybody surprised when you deliver a review or deliver someone's feedback at all? Have you ever had that where they're kind of like, if you were to give them a list and say, how do you rank on a scale of 1 to 10? And your list and their list is extremely different?
That's bad.
Does that ever happen where you give someone a bad review and they're like, I think you're wrong? Has that ever happened? Or are they usually...
Well, they'll disagree. What do you do then? Employee says, no, I think your assessment is wrong. I think I met or exceeded expectations this area. And you said, no, I don't think you met expectations. Now, what's your next move?
That's where you go back to the concrete. What do you have to back up this information?
So you try and identify examples. Here's why it's customer satisfaction. Here's where I think you missed the mark, etc.
Didn't we talk about this? Didn't I try to coach you before?
Ooh, so that means you had to have talked about this, right? Yeah, remember on July, we talked about this and that. Oh, yeah, that's right. And remember we talked about this and that. Remember you were going to do this, and you never did? Remember that?
In HR, we call this the critical incidents approach, that you have these conversations during the course of the year, and you jot yourself a little note. On June 18th, had a conversation with Bob about the fact that, and you throw that into a folder somewhere, just to remind yourself about that if it comes up. Now, I would just note very quickly, even though these things are not in the HR folder, they are part of the HR folder. So if an employee is getting access to the HR folder, like due to a lawsuit or something, those notes that are in your desk are subpoenable. So when you're writing those notes to yourself, recognize that these could show up in court. I had a client who had an employee who was fired because she was a pain in the backside. The supervisor had notes. And one of the notes was, once again today, Jane is acting like she's on the rag. You really want to show up in court and defend that comment. So don't be stupid about what you write in the little notes to yourself. It makes the HR people cringe.
Yeah. And so I think we've talked about examples of these crucial conversations, when they should happen, and the meaning and benefit to having frequent conversations as well. The second bullet is talking about creating a social environment. I mean, do you like going, well, some of you may, but Do you like going places where you don't know or care about the people you work with? Probably not. Isn't it better when you at least know them? Even the introverts, they don't even talk to people unless they know them. Right, introverts? So how do we create a social environment? How do we create a team that wants to encourage each other, talk to each other, hang out on weekends? How do we build a team and create chemistry? Anybody sports people in here? What do coaches do when they want to build a team? Hype them up. What else?
They make a chant.
Team building. What are some team building things you can do? Golfing. Boom. That's social and exciting, right? What do you coach?
I just drink beer.
You just drink beer and watch the score, huh? Yeah. Some call that coaching. What else? What are things you can do to create a team, to build a team?
Find what they can contribute to the team.
Finding out their individual strengths, right? Do people that are full of talent always contribute to the team? No, why not?
Because they're usually self-driven around themselves.
Sure, sometimes, yeah. So sometimes there's personality issues with talent. What else? If I have 5 7-foot post players, am I going to start them all at the same time on the basketball team? Why? Who's going to bring the ball up? Who's going to play D? I mean, what are we going to do with 5 post players, right? So knowing individual strengths, putting those strengths together into a cohesive team, and organizing the team and firing them up, right? What else can we do, Dale? What can we do to create social environments where we can appreciate one another, we have a good time, we have friendships, that coworkers we like to call friends?
Well, I would put a focus on what are we doing to make people feel engaged, that their opinions matter. And if I feel like my opinion matters at work, then I'm going to be willing to share ideas and I'm going to be willing to discuss. If I'm in a work environment where when something goes wrong, we fix the blame. We got to figure out who screwed up and what we're going to do to the person who screwed up, people aren't going to create a social environment where they're willing to interact. The key, it strikes me, is that you're getting people to work collaboratively together. You're getting their input, you're getting their ideas to help reach that shared vision that we talked about before. But again, there's a balance. I want to ask people for their input, but you got to be careful that you don't fake it. I've seen plenty of cases in organizations where the organization asked employees for their input and then explained to the employees why they were wrong. And we do this in organizations all the time. We do this in our private lives all the time. I know that it's good to get the employee's input, so I go to the employee and say, well, what do you think is the best approach to do this? And then you start explaining to me what you think is your approach, and then I explain to you why that's a mistake, and that's not what we should do. The only thing worse than not being asked your opinion is asked and then ignored. And in some cases, I'm not going to ask your opinion, because frankly, I don't care what your opinion is. I know what the answer is. This is what we're going to do because I'm in charge in time and yada, yada, yada. That's what we're going to do. But in my mind, the way you build that team is the feeling that we're all working collaboratively to achieve a common outcome. And it may be that this results in our socializing away from work. Maybe it doesn't. I mean, it's fine if people do, but I don't care if they don't, as long as they're all willing to collaborate at work. And there's some of the social interaction. Knowing a little bit about each other provides the social lubricant, if you will, to get over some of the rough spots. One of the things I like is travel. One of the things in our executive MBA program is we take an international trip, 10-day trip. And the students are tight, they work well together, and then 7 months into a 16-month program, they do an international trip. And they almost always come back and say, man, we're closer. I can't believe how much closer we got. 2 of my sons, their wives, my wife and I are leaving Thursday for a 10-day trip. An international trip, we're going to Sweden. And this is partially because kind of want to go to Sweden again. Sweden's cool. But more so, this is a team building thing within the family. And I'm convinced that the 6 of us having this international experience will make the 6 of us even closer. So the company should take you all on international trips regularly. You can work that in the HR budget, can't you? So much for hats and T-shirts.
Yeah, so we have the
Sorry.
steps, right? Empathy and compassion, creating a social environment. We gave you some different examples of what that could look like. As Dale mentioned before, create helpful leaders that are willing to help each other. Dale was talking about how help is the most powerful word in the English language. So what does it mean to be helpful? How can we get them to where they need to go better than anybody else? Who are the great coaches and the great leaders? Ones that build the best teams, the ones that build the best players. How do we create a team and be so helpful to those individuals that we can get them where they need to go? Because that's ultimately the job, right? We need to get them to do their job fantastically and love it, right? That's what it takes to be helpful. Second one second to last, we have the transparency and vision and future. So remember the issue we were talking about before when outcomes don't align? How can we create very transparent goals and objectives throughout the entire team to where it's not confusing that I can go to the CEO and say, this is my job, and he says, yeah, that's about right, that'll work perfectly. That all levels in between, the first line supervisor all the way up to the C-suite, have mirrored goals that are all staggered and completely in lockstep with one another. And then finally, this one should be easier to some than others, but a level of accessibility and approachability. Do people feel like they can trust you to talk to you? Can they open up your door? Do they want to have those conversations with you ever? And these are some next steps that you can jot down and try if you're wondering how we can integrate everything that we talked about a little bit today. We do have only a couple minutes left of your time, so if you have any questions at all, we'd like you to just kind of chime in. I promised a link to Dale's podcast. That's that QR code on the right, and this is my podcast on the left, right here. So if you like me more, go to this podcast. You like Dale more, go to that podcast. But we have 2 minutes left, I think, of your time. So if you have any questions or we talked about something you wanted to dig into a little bit, we do have a little bit of availability still left in the hour.
Any questions? Concerns? Frustrations? I would note that you have all already experienced what I consider to be the toughest transition in organizations. And that's going from a line employee to a manager. As a line employee, the mantra is if you want something done right, do it yourself and make sure that it works. As a manager, it's create an environment in which other people can be successful. And making that transition is really tough. My experience has been if people can make that transition, if you can become a first-line supervisor, you can work your way up the management ranks. The rest of it's logistics. But that transition in thinking from being a line employee to a leader can be a really tough transition to make. It is harder than every other step of the management until you become a CEO. And that's another really tough step because now you don't have any playmates. There's nobody else at your level. So you get there, that'll be a whole nother discussion.
Just join the MBA program and you'll have plenty. Any gripes at all? Anything that you don't like about being a leader?
I would note that I'll bet most of your headaches are with that 20% of employees that don't meet expectations. And one of the things you need to avoid is you let the 20% of the employees that don't meet expectations chew up 80% of your time. Because I can make an argument that you ought to spend 80% of your time helping the 20% of your employees that are stars flourish. You're going to get more return on investment with them than you are in the 20% that are dead wood. I want to invest, I want to try and help them. But after a relatively short period of time, I want to help them leave. Try again. Questions, concerns? All right, final comment. If after this is over, you think about this and you're trying to apply some of these concepts and you have questions, I strongly encourage you to do two things. One, if you want, talk to us. We find this stuff fascinating. I find leadership and development, et cetera, great. Talk to the HR folks, get my email address, shoot me an email. I'm happy to talk about it. It's good for my marriage because my wife does not enjoy talking about this. If I can get it out of my system at work, this is good. This is the second one of these I've owned. I do not want to own a third, so this is good. The other end is HR. Often in organizations, we view HR as sort of an enforcer of rules. HR really needs to be an ally. When you have a people problem, HR should be a group that you can walk in, sit down and say, hey, I got this employee X, I'm struggling with this thing, I'm thinking of doing X, etc. I want to have a difficult conversation. I'm not quite sure exactly how it would go. I'd like to role play the conversation with you. You play the employee, let me play what I'm going to say, and see how it flows in the conversation. They should be your ally in human resource and people kind of issues. Anything else for the common good? AJ, any final comment?
We appreciate your time today, everybody. I really hope that you took something away that you can implement in your teams, and hope you guys all go out there and win like Nick Saban. Roll Tide. I'm just kidding. I'm not a Bama fan. I'm not even close. Well, have a great night. Have a great day. Yeah.
All right. Very good. Thank you all very much. Have a good one.